Captain Kim Tae-ho felt the cold metal floor beneath his boots as he walked across the bridge of the exploration ship Horizon's Edge. The stars outside looked different here, far from Earth's familiar constellations. His crew had been traveling, for months, searching for new worlds and alien life. But what they found instead was something nobody expected. The alien beacon appeared on their screens 3 days ago. It was old, incredibly old, floating alone in the darkness of space. The technology was unlike anything humans had ever seen before. When they finally decoded its message, the words sent chills down everyone's spine. Turn back. This place is death. Dr. Park Mina pushed her glasses up her nose as she studied the readings. She was the ship's expert on alien cultures and ancient civilizations. Her hands shook slightly as she looked at the data. Captain, this isn't just some random message. Look at these energy signatures. This beacon has been broadcasting for millions of years. Whatever built this was far more advanced than us. She paused, looking directly at the captain. This is a warning we should take seriously. When something this old and this advanced tells you to stay away, maybe we should listen. But Lee Jun-ho, the chief engineer, wasn't convinced. He was a practical man who believed in facts and evidence, not fear and superstition. Come on, Dr. Park. You're letting your imagination run wild. This could be anything. Maybe it's just marking territory like animals do back on Earth. Or maybe it's some kind of old advertisement that we're misunderstanding. He pointed at the beacon on the screen. Just because we can't understand their technology doesn't mean they were smarter than us. They're dead, aren't they? We're still here, still exploring, still growing stronger. The bridge fell silent as the crew waited for their captain's decision. Some looked worried, others seemed curious. Captain Kim had always been known for his bold choices. He was the kind of leader who pushed boundaries and took risks. That's how he got command of one of humanity's most advanced exploration ships. Kim stared at the beacon for a long moment. His family back on Earth had always told him he was too curious for his own good. As a child, he would climb the tallest trees, explore abandoned buildings, and ask questions that made adults uncomfortable. That same curiosity had carried him to the stars. You know what I think? He said finally. I think humanity didn't become the dominant species on Earth by running away from the unknown. We didn't build these ships and travel across the galaxy by listening to every warning we received. He turned to face his crew. Every great discovery in human history came from someone brave enough to ignore the warnings. When people said this Earth was flat, we sailed beyond the horizon anyway. When they said we couldn't fly, we built airplanes. When they said space was impossible to reach, we went to the moon. Dr. Park tried to interrupt, but the captain held up his hand. I understand your concerns, Doctor, but consider this. Whatever left that beacon is gone, dead, extinct. We're alive, we're here, and we have the most advanced technology humanity has ever created. If there was real danger here, wouldn't we have detected it by now? The captain's confidence was infectious. Several crew members nodded in agreement. The human spirit of exploration was strong on this ship. These weren't ordinary people. They were the best and brightest humanity had to offer, chosen specifically for their courage and determination. Set course for the beacon, Captain Kim ordered. We're going to find out what's so dangerous about this place, and when we do, we'll probably laugh about how scared we got over some ancient alien's idea of a joke. As the ship moved deeper into the unknown system, none of them realized they were about to discover why some warnings should never be ignored. The beacon continued its endless broadcast, but now it seemed less like a threat and more like a desperate plea from something that had once been just as curious and confident as they were. The first dead ship appeared on their screens like a ghost from humanity's worst nightmares. It was massive, easily twice the size of the Horizon's Edge, but completely dark. No lights, no energy signatures, no signs of life at all. Captain Kim felt his stomach drop as more shapes began appearing. On the radar. My God, whispered Navigation Officer Choi So-ra, her voice barely audible. There are hundreds of them. As their ship moved deeper into the system, the true horror revealed itself. This wasn't just a few abandoned vessels. This was a graveyard that stretched for millions of kilometers in every direction. Ships of every size and design floated silently in the darkness. Some looked almost human in their construction, while others were so alien that it hurt to look at them too long. Lee Jun-ho ran his hands through his hair as he studied the readings. "Captain, I'm counting over 3,000 individual vessels, and they're all from different species. Look at these hull designs. I've never seen anything like most of these. Each dead ship told the same story. They had warning beacons, just like the first one they'd encountered. But as the horizon's edge pushed deeper into the system, the messages became more frantic, more desperate. Turn back before it's too late. We should have listened. Death waits at the center. Please learn from our mistake." Dr. Park Mina worked frantically at her station, trying to decode the various alien languages. Her face grew paler with each translation. "Captain, every single species that came here received the same warning we did. Every single one ignored it, just like us." She pulled up holographic displays showing different alien scripts. "Look at this. This ship here. They were explorers, just like us. This message says they detected the warning beacon and decided to investigate anyway. This other ship, they were scientists seeking knowledge. And this one was a military vessel convinced they could handle any threat. The diversity of the dead ships was staggering. Some were sleek and beautiful, others looked like floating cities, and a few appeared to be living organisms rather than constructed vessels. But they all shared one thing in common. They were all empty, lifeless hulks drifting in the cosmic wind. Choi Sora's voice cut through the bridge's growing tension. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy readings from the system's center. There's some kind of structure orbiting the dying star. It's enormous, bigger than anything we've ever seen. On the main screen, they could see it in the distance. A dark shape that seemed to bend light around itself, orbiting a red giant star that was slowly dying. Even from millions of kilometers away, it looked ominous and wrong, like a cancer growing in the heart of the solar system. That night, the nightmares began. Crew members reported strange dreams of being watched, of something calling to them from the darkness. Some woke up screaming, about voices in their heads, begging them to turn back while they still could. Dr. Park approached the captain privately. "The crew is scared, Kim. Maybe we should consider retreat. We've learned something important here. This is clearly a trap of some kind." But Captain Kim stared at the mysterious structure on the screen with the same determination that had driven humanity from caves to the stars. "Look at all these dead civilizations, Park. Every one of them stopped here and died. But what if we're different? What if we're the ones who finally figure out what happened here?" He pointed at the graveyard surrounding them. "These species failed because they gave up. Humans don't give up. We adapt, we overcome, we survive. That's what makes us special." The ship continued its journey toward the center of the system, passing through the cosmic cemetery of failed expeditions. None of them realized they were about to become the latest addition to this monument of curiosity gone wrong. As the horizon's edge approached the mysterious structure, Captain Kim felt his breath catch in his throat. The thing was impossibly huge, easily the size of Earth's moon, but it seemed to twist and bend in ways that made his eyes water. Parts of it appeared to exist in normal space, while other sections flickered in and out of reality like a bad television signal. "This doesn't make sense," Lee Jun-ho muttered, staring at his engineering readouts. "The structure is there, but it's also not there. My instruments are going crazy. It's like it exists in multiple dimensions at once." The surface of the station was covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Spires and towers reached out in impossible directions, some seeming to curve back on themselves. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like looking at a nightmare made of crystal and shadow. Communications Officer Han Dong-min suddenly jerked back from his console, his face white with fear. "Captain, I'm picking up something. Not radio signals, not any kind of communication we understand. It's like voices in my head." The feeling hit the entire crew at once. A wave of pure terror washed over them, so intense that several people fell to their knees. It wasn't just fear, it was deeper than that. It was the kind of horror that reaches into your soul and shows you everything you've ever been afraid of. But Dr. Park Mina, despite her trembling hands, forced herself to focus on the sensation. "Wait," she gasped. "This isn't an attack. Listen carefully to what you're feeling. She closed her eyes and concentrated on the waves of terror flowing from the station. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. The fear wasn't random, it was structured, purposeful. They're trying to communicate with us. The terror isn't meant to hurt us, it's a warning. Han Dongmin nodded slowly, his face still pale. I can sense something else now. Sadness. Deep, endless sadness. And regret. As the crew began to understand that the fear was actually a form of communication, they started picking up more complex messages. Images flashed in their minds, scenes of other ships, other crews, other species approaching this same station, all driven by the same curiosity that had brought humanity here. Dr. Park worked frantically to access the ancient databases they'd recovered from the dead ships. The alien languages were incredibly complex, but patterns were emerging. I'm getting fragments of records from dozens of different civilizations. They all tell the same story. She brought up holographic displays showing translated text from various species. The entities inside that station, they weren't always like this. They were explorers, scientists, adventurers, just like us. Each species that arrived here was drawn by the same thing we were: the mystery, the unknown technology, the promise of discovery. The terrible truth began to unfold as more records were decoded. The station was a prison, built by some ancient race to contain something that should never have been released. The entities trapped inside had once been living beings from hundreds of different worlds, all transformed by their contact with whatever lurked at the station's heart. They feed on life force, Dr. Park whispered, her voice shaking, not by choice but because they have to. The transformation changes them into something that can only survive by draining the life from others. Captain Kim stared at the station with new understanding. The warnings weren't threats. They were desperate attempts to save us from their fate. Han Dongmin suddenly straightened up, his eyes wide. Captain, I'm getting a clearer message now. They're showing me images of their past lives. There's a scientist here who looks almost human, and a warrior from a species with 4 arms, and oh God, there's so many of them. The communication became stronger as the ship drew closer. The entities were trying to show them scenes from before their transformation. Happy moments, family gatherings, successful discoveries. They had been people once, with hopes and dreams, and loved ones waiting for them back home. They're begging us to leave, Dr. Park said, tears streaming down her face. They don't want us to become like them. They're trapped in there, conscious but changed, forced to feed on the very thing they once cherished, life itself. But even knowing the truth, Captain Kim couldn't bring himself to order a retreat. The human need to understand, to push forward, to solve the mystery was too strong. They had come too far to turn back now. The moment the horizon's edge crossed an invisible line around the station, everything changed. Captain Kim felt it first. A strange tugging sensation, like something was pulling at his very soul. The ship's engines suddenly stopped responding, and all their navigation systems went dead. What's happening? Choi So-ra frantically worked at her controls, but nothing responded. I can't get us to turn around. It's like we're caught in some kind of invisible net. Lee Jun-ho's face went pale as he stared at his engineering displays. Captain, we're trapped. Something is holding us here, and I don't understand how. The engines are working, but we're not moving away from the station. If anything, we're being pulled closer. That's when the aging began. It started slowly, so subtly that nobody noticed at first. A few grey hairs here and there, some new lines around the eyes. But within an hour, the changes became impossible to ignore. Dr. Park Mina looked at her reflection in a computer screen and gasped. Her face, which had been young and smooth just hours before, now showed clear signs of aging. Wrinkles had appeared around her eyes, and her black hair was streaked with silver. This can't be happening, she whispered, touching her face with trembling fingers. The horror spread through the crew as everyone began to notice the changes in themselves and others. Lee Jun-ho held up his hands and watched in terror as age spots appeared on his skin. His fingers, once steady and strong, now shook with the weakness of an old man. We walked right into it, he said, his voice cracking. Just like every other species that came here. We thought we were smarter, more advanced, more prepared, but we made the exact same mistake they all did. Captain Kim felt his joints beginning to ache in ways they never had before. His back, which had always been straight and strong, now bent slightly under an invisible weight. The warnings, he realized with growing horror. They weren't threats, trying to keep us away from some treasure or territory. They were desperate pleas from people just like us, trying to save us from their fate. The communications from the station became clearer now that they were trapped. The entities weren't sending messages of anger or hatred. They were sending waves of desperate sorrow, trying to warn the humans about what was about to happen to. Tham Han Dongmin suddenly understood the full scope of their situation. They're not evil, Captain. The entities in that station, they were explorers once, just like us, scientists, adventurers, people driven by curiosity to seek out the unknown. But something in that station changed them, transformed them into creatures that have to feed on life force to survive. The aging process accelerated. Crew members who had been in their 20s and 30s now looked like they were approaching middle age. Their hair was turning grey, their skin was wrinkling, and their bodies were losing the strength and energy of youth. It's draining our life force, Dr. Park realized, her voice now carrying the roughness of age. Whatever built this station created a perfect trap. It uses our own curiosity against us, draws us in with mystery and wonder, then feeds off our life essence. The terrible irony wasn't lost on any of them. Humanity's greatest strength, their endless curiosity, their refusal to accept limits, their drive to explore and discover, had become their greatest weakness. Every species that had come here had been driven by the same noble impulses that had brought humans to the stars. Captain Kim tried to radio for help, but their communications were being blocked. They were completely cut off from the rest of human space. No one would know what had happened to them. No one would learn from their mistake. How long do we have? He asked Dr. Park. She looked at her medical scanner, though her now elderly hands could barely hold it steady. At this rate of aging, maybe a few days before we're too old to function. Maybe a week before. She couldn't finish the sentence. The four entities in the station continued their desperate communications, showing the humans images of what they had once been. Happy families, successful careers, dreams of discovery and adventure. All of it lost when they had ignored the warnings and been drawn into the same trap that now held humanity. The station's true purpose was becoming clear. It wasn't just a prison. It was a factory converting curious explorers into the very entities that now tried to warn others away. Soon, the crew of the Horizon's Edge would join that chorus of voices, desperately trying to save the next group of explorers who would inevitably ignore their warnings. The smell of death filled the corridors of the Horizon's Edge. Captain Kim dragged himself through the ship, his body now that of an 80-year-old man, though only 2 days had passed since they'd been trapped. Behind him, the bodies of his crew members lay scattered like fallen leaves, some completely drained of life, others barely clinging to their final breaths. Navigation Officer Choi So-ra had been the first to die. Her body had simply given out when the aging process accelerated beyond what any human could survive. Communications Officer Han Dong-min lasted a few hours longer, but even his young, strong body couldn't handle being aged 50 years in a single day. Only 5 crew members remained alive, and they were all in terrible condition. Dr. Park Mina could barely walk, her once sharp mind now clouded by the exhaustion of extreme old age. Lee Jun-ho sat slumped in a corner, his hands too weak to operate the tools he'd used his entire career. "We have to get to the station," Dr. Park wheezed, her voice barely audible. "If there's any chance of escape, any way to reverse this, the answers will be there." Chief Medical Officer Yoon Hai-jin, now looking like a man in his 90s, checked, his medical scanner with shaking hands. "We're dying, Kim. All of us. We have maybe 6 hours before our bodies completely shut down." Using what little strength they had left, the survivors managed to board a small shuttle and dock with the alien station. The moment they stepped inside, the horror of their situation became even clearer. The station wasn't just a trap. It was a museum of failures. Thousands of chambers lined the corridors, each one containing what looked like a glowing orb of light. But as they got closer, they realized these weren't just lights. They were consciousness, the minds and souls of every explorer who had ever been caught by the station's trap. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Park, her aged eyes wide with terror. "They're all still here. Every species that ignored the warnings, every explorer who thought they could succeed where others failed. Their bodies died, but their minds were preserved. The orbs pulsed with different colors and patterns, each one representing a different species, a different civilization that had fallen into the same trap. Some had been here for millions of years, their consciousness trapped in these glowing prisons, while their bodies had long since turned to dust. As they moved deeper into the station, they found the control center. Ancient computers covered the walls, their displays showing information in languages from across the galaxy. Dr. Park, despite her failing body, managed to access some of the files. "The station was built by an ancient race," she explained, her voice hollow with despair. "They discovered something, some kind of entity or force that feeds on life itself. It was spreading across the galaxy, consuming entire worlds. So they built this prison to contain it. The truth was more terrible than they had imagined. The station wasn't just trapping individual explorers, it was using their life force to keep something much worse locked away. Every ship that arrived, every curious species that ignored the warnings, was essentially becoming fuel for a cosmic prison. The warnings were their final mercy," Dr. Park continued. "The builders knew that eventually someone would find this place. They set up the beacon system, hoping that intelligent species would be smart enough to stay away. But they underestimated the power of curiosity." Yoon Hae-jin examined the medical data they'd gathered. His face, now ancient and wrinkled, showed deep sadness. There might be a way to access the station's escape systems, but someone would have to interface directly with the main computer. The energy required would kill them instantly. Captain Kim looked around at his dying crew, then at the thousands of trapped consciousness surrounding them. Every species that had ever reached for the stars, every civilization that had dared to explore the unknown, was represented here. All of them had been driven by the same noble desire that had brought humanity to space, the need to know, to understand, to push beyond the boundaries of the known world. "We did this to ourselves," he said quietly. "Every species here thought they were special, thought they were different. We all believed we could succeed where others had failed." The price of human curiosity was now crystal clear. Some knowledge came at too high a cost. Some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved, and some warnings should never be ignored. But it was too late for regrets. The only question now was whether one of them would sacrifice their life to save the others, or if they would all join the glowing orbs that filled the station's endless corridors. Captain Kim stared at the ancient control systems, his aged hands trembling as he tried to understand what they were seeing. While the other trapped consciousness around them pulsed with resignation and defeat, something different was stirring in the human survivors. Even as their bodies failed, their minds refused to give up. "Look at this," Dr. Park said, her voice weak but determined. She had managed to access more of the station's records. Every other species that got trapped here just accepted it. They despaired, they died, and their consciousness was absorbed into the system. Lee Jun-ho, despite barely being able to stand, forced himself to examine the engineering data. "But humans are different, aren't we? We don't just lie down and die, we fight until the very end." That's when they found it, buried deep in the station's most ancient files. A fail-safe system left by the original builders. It wasn't meant to free everyone, but it could save most of them. The catch was brutal. Someone had to stay behind to maintain the prison that kept the cosmic horror contained. "It makes sense," Dr. Park explained, her scientific mind still working despite her failing body. The builders knew that eventually someone might find a way to partially escape. But the prison has to be maintained, or something far worse than death would be unleashed on the galaxy. Security Chief Oh Sang-woo, who had been quiet since the aging began, suddenly spoke up. His body was as frail as the others, but his eyes still burned with determination. "So, one person stays behind to keep the prison running, and the rest can escape back to warn humanity." The choice was obvious to Captain Kim. As the leader of the expedition, As the one who had made the decision to ignore the warnings, he bore the responsibility for their situation. "I'll stay," he announced without hesitation. "This is my fault. I brought us here despite all the warnings. I should pay the price." But something remarkable happened then, something that had never occurred with any other species trapped in the station. The crew rebelled. "No," Oh Sang-woo said firmly, stepping forward despite his weakened state. "We don't abandon our own. That's not how humans work." Dr. Park nodded, surprising everyone with her strength. "Sang-woo is right. We came here together, we'll find a way out together. No one gets left behind." Even Lee Jun-ho, who could barely lift his head, managed to speak. "Captain, with respect, you're not making this decision alone. We're a crew, a team. We don't sacrifice one person to save the others." The argument that followed was unlike anything the station had ever witnessed. The trapped consciousness of other species watched in amazement as the humans refused to accept the obvious solution. Every other civilization had quickly decided who would stay and who would go. But humans were different. "This is insane," Captain Kim said, though there was pride in his voice. "One person dying to save four is basic mathematics. It's the logical choice." "Logic isn't everything," Oh Sang-woo replied. "We're not computers. We're human beings, and we don't leave family behind." The debate continued for precious hours as their bodies continued to fail. But what made it remarkable wasn't just their refusal to sacrifice one for many, it was their absolute determination to find another way. While other species had accepted the failsafe as their only option, humans immediately began looking for alternatives. "There has to be another solution," Dr. Park insisted, forcing her tired mind to work through the problem. "The builders were advanced, but they weren't gods. If they could create this system, we can find a way to improve it." Lee Jun-ho, despite his condition, began examining the station's power systems. "What if we don't need a person to stay? What if we can modify the system to run automatically?" The other consciousness in the station seemed to stir with interest. Never before had they seen such stubborn refusal to accept fate. Other species had been brave, intelligent, and resourceful, but they had also been logical. When faced with an impossible choice, they had made the practical decision, but humans were proving to be beautifully illogical. Their refusal to abandon each other, their stubborn insistence that there had to be a better way, their absolute determination to fight until the very end, it was all completely irrational. And yet, it was also inspiring. "We're going to die. Anyway, if we keep arguing," Captain Kim pointed out. "At least if I stay, some of us can warn Earth about this place." "Then we'll die together," Oh Sang-woo said simply. "But we won't give up trying to find a way to save everyone. That's what makes us human." The idea came to Captain Kim in a moment of desperate clarity. If they couldn't escape the trap, and they refused to sacrifice one of their own, then maybe it was time to do something that no other species had ever attempted. Something completely insane. "What if we destroy the whole station?" he said quietly. The others stared at him in shock. Dr. Park's aged face showed confusion. "Kim, that would kill us all. And it might release whatever horror this place is keeping contained." "Maybe," the captain replied, his voice growing stronger despite his failing body. "But every other species that came here played by the station's rules. They accepted the trap. They accepted the choice between death and sacrifice. What if we refuse to play the game at all?" Lee Jun-ho, despite his weakened condition, began to understand. "You're talking about mutually assured destruction. If we can't win, we make sure nobody else can either." The plan was simple in its madness. Instead of trying to escape or finding someone to stay behind, they would systematically destroy the station's containment systems. If the ancient prison was going to kill them anyway, they would take it down with them. "I can rig our ship's engines to overload," Lee Jun-ho said, his engineering mind already working through the calculations. "The explosion won't just destroy us and the station, it'll tear a hole in space-time itself. Whatever's being kept here will be destroyed, along with everything else." It was the most human solution possible. If they couldn't save themselves, they would make sure the threat could never harm anyone else. No other species had been willing to consider such complete destruction. The moment they began working on their plan, something extraordinary happened. The station's systems began reacting in ways they had never seen before. The thousands of trapped consciousness started pulsing more urgently, and the entities that had been feeding on their life force suddenly seemed afraid. They're panicking, Dr. Park realized. Look at the energy readings. The station is trying to stop us. For the first time since they'd been trapped, the entities began communicating clearly, instead of through waves of terror and despair. Images flooded their minds, not warnings this time, but desperate pleas for negotiation. Wu Sang-woo felt the communication hit him like a physical blow. They're trying to talk to us, really talk, not just send feelings. The message was clearer than anything they had received before. The entities were revealing something they had never told any other species. Their hunger didn't have to be satisfied by living beings. They could survive on artificial energy sources, but no previous civilization had possessed technology advanced enough to create sustainable alternatives. Wait, Dr. Park said, her scientific mind racing despite her physical condition. They're showing me energy patterns, artificial power sources. They don't have to feed on life force if they have another option. The revelation was staggering. Every species that had been trapped here had lacked the technology to provide an alternative food source for the entities. But humans were different. They had developed nuclear technology, fusion power, antimatter reactors, energy sources that could potentially satisfy the entities' needs. Our nuclear technology, Dr. Park breathed, understanding flooding through her. It might actually work. Lee, Junho stopped his work on the engine overload and began examining the station's power systems with new eyes. If we can tap into our ship's reactor, create a sustainable energy feed for these entities, they might not need to drain life force anymore. The entities, sensing that the humans might actually have a solution, began sharing more information. They showed images of their original forms, their civilizations, their desperate attempts to find alternatives to feeding on life. For millions of years, they had been trapped not just in the station, but in a cycle of horror they couldn't break. Captain Kim felt a surge of hope for the first time since they'd been trapped. So this isn't just about escaping. This is about solving a problem that's existed for millions of years. The plan was still dangerous. Converting their ship's power systems to feed the entities would require precise calculations and perfect execution. One mistake could kill them all, or release the cosmic horror the station was designed to contain. But for the first time, they had a real chance. Not just to escape, but to break the cycle that had claimed thousands of species. Instead of adding to the graveyard of dead ships, they might actually solve the mystery that had been claiming lives for eons. This is what humans do, Oh Sang-woo said with fierce pride. We don't just survive problems, we fix them. The work took everything they had left. Lee Junho's hands shook as he connected the final power cables between their ship's nuclear reactor and the station's ancient systems. Dr. Park collapsed twice while programming the energy conversion protocols, her aged body pushed far beyond its limits. It's working, Oh Sang-woo whispered in amazement as the station's readings began to change. The entities are accepting the artificial energy. They're not draining our life force anymore. For the first time in days, the crew felt the terrible aging process slow down and then stop completely. They were still old, still damaged by what they'd endured, but they weren't dying anymore. The nuclear energy from their ship was successfully feeding the hungry entities, but their celebration was short-lived. As Dr. Park examined the technical requirements more closely, her face fell with disappointment. "The system isn't stable," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "The connection between our technology and theirs is too delicate. Someone has to monitor it constantly, make adjustments, keep it running. If the energy feed is interrupted for even a few minutes, the entities will start feeding on life force." Again, the terrible truth became clear. They had found a solution, but it required constant maintenance. Someone had to stay behind to keep the system working, to ensure that the cosmic prison remained secure. The crew immediately began arguing again, each person volunteering to be the one who stayed. But Captain Kim had already made his decision. "This is my responsibility," he said firmly, his voice carrying the authority that had made him a captain. "I brought us here. I ignored the warnings when everyone told me we should listen. The price for that decision is mine to pay." "Captain, no," Dr. Park pleaded. "We can take turns. We can figure out a rotation system." "The ship is too damaged to make multiple trips," Kim replied, gesturing toward their battered vessel. "Look at it. The engines are barely holding together after what we've been through. You'll be lucky to make it back to human space at all." Oh Sang-woo stepped forward, his aged face set with determination. "I should stay. I'm security chief. It's my job to protect the crew." "And you'll protect them by getting them home safely," Captain Kim said. "That's an order." The argument continued for hours, but deep down everyone knew the captain was right. The Horizon's Edge was severely damaged. Their life support systems were failing, their engines were unstable, and they had barely enough fuel to reach the nearest human outpost. There was no possibility of return trips or rescue missions. As his crew prepared to leave, Captain Kim began the delicate work of integrating human technology with the station's ancient systems. The nuclear reactor would need constant monitoring. The energy conversion systems required regular adjustments, and the prison's containment fields had to be maintained. "You don't have to do this alone," Dr. Park said as she prepared to board the shuttle. "The entities here, they were explorers once. Maybe they can help you." Kim nodded, looking at the thousands of glowing orbs that contained the consciousness of trapped explorers. "Maybe we can learn from each other." The final goodbye was heartbreaking. These people had been through hell together, and now they were being torn apart. As the damaged shuttle pulled away from the station, Captain Kim stood alone in the control room, watching his friends disappear into the darkness of space. He began recording his final log entry, knowing it would become part of the station's warning system. "This is Captain Kim Tae-ho of the Earth vessel Horizon's Edge. If you're receiving this message, it means you've ignored the warnings, just like we did. Turn back. We thought we were different, thought we were smarter than all the species who came before us. We were wrong." He paused, looking at the complex systems he would spend the rest of his life maintaining. "We paid the price for human curiosity. Don't make the same mistake. Some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. Some warnings should never be ignored. Turn back while you still can." The message joined thousands of others broadcast into space as a desperate plea to future explorers. But Kim knew with sad certainty that someone would eventually ignore it just as he had. 5 years had passed since the Horizon's Edge had limped back to human space with its tale of horror and sacrifice. The survivors, Dr. Park Mina, Lee, Junho and Oh Sang-woo, had tried to warn everyone. They testified before the Earth Council, wrote detailed reports, and pleaded with anyone who would listen to stay away from the cursed system. But their warnings only made more people curious. Captain Yoo Jae-sung stood on the bridge of the new exploration vessel Starbound, studying the same beacon that had doomed Captain Kim's crew. The message was exactly as the survivors had described. "Turn back. This place is death." But now there was a new voice added to the chorus, Kim's own warning, broadcast alongside the ancient alien pleas. "The survivors were very clear about what happened here," said Dr. Lim So-young, the expedition's lead scientist. "We should approach with extreme caution." But Yu was driven by the same curiosity that had claimed every previous expedition. "That's exactly why we're here, Doctor. To understand what happened, to learn from it, maybe even to help Captain Kim if he's still alive." The journey through the ship graveyard was eerily familiar, yet different. The dead vessels were still there, but something had changed. Energy readings showed that the massive station at the system's center was now active, no longer the dark, terrifying structure described in the reports. When they finally reached the station, they found something unprecedented. The ancient prison had been transformed into what looked like a research facility. Lights glowed in the corridors, life support systems hummed with activity, and there were signs of recent modifications everywhere. Captain Kim met them at the docking bay, and the sight of him shocked everyone into silence. He was clearly still human but changed. His hair had turned completely white, his eyes held depths of knowledge that seemed almost alien, and there was something about his presence that made everyone uncomfortable. "I told them you'd come," he said with a sad smile. "The entities predicted it. They said humans would never be able to resist investigating, no matter how many warnings we sent." Kim led them through corridors that now bustled with activity. The station was alive with purpose, its ancient systems working in harmony with human technology. But most amazing of all were the entities themselves. No longer feeding on life force, they had regained much of their original personalities and memories. "They remember everything," Kim explained as they walked past chambers, where the glowing consciousness interacted with sophisticated computer systems. Millions of years of galactic history, thousands of different civilizations, technologies. We can barely comprehend. The knowledge they possess is invaluable. Dr. Lim's scientific mind was already racing with possibilities. "Captain, the research potential here is incredible. We could learn about species that went extinct before Earth was even formed." "That's exactly what I was afraid you'd say," Kim replied. "Every day I spend here, I learn something new. Every conversation with these entities reveals another mystery, another question that needs answering. It's intoxicating." He stopped walking and turned to face the newcomers. "But it's also corrupting. Look at me. I'm changing, slowly but surely. The longer I stay here, the more I become like them. Not physically, but mentally. My thoughts, my priorities, my very sense of what it means to be human." Captain Yu studied Kim's face and saw the truth there. The man before them was still recognizably the captain who had sacrificed himself 5 years ago, but there was something else there, too. An alien quality that hadn't been there before. "We want to establish a permanent research station," Yu announced. "A full scientific team, rotating crews, proper support systems. We can learn so much here." Kim's laugh was bitter and knowing. "Of course you do. That's exactly what I would have said 5 years ago. We can't help ourselves, can we? It's our nature to push forward, to seek answers, to believe we can handle whatever consequences come from our curiosity." He gestured toward the vast station around them. Every species that came here thought the same thing. They all believed they could control the situation, study it safely, learn from it without being corrupted by it. And look where it got them. The newcomers spent days touring the station, marveling at the incredible knowledge stored within. The entities shared stories of civilizations that had ruled the galaxy millions of years before humanity existed. They revealed technologies that could revolutionize space travel, solve energy crises, and unlock the secrets of the universe itself. But Kim's warnings grew more urgent with each passing day. "The corruption is subtle," he told them. "It doesn't happen all at once. You start by telling yourself you're just gathering information, just learning. But gradually, the knowledge becomes more important than anything else, more important than home, than family, than your own humanity." As the Starbound prepared to leave with their initial findings, Captain Yu made his announcement. "We're leaving a skeleton crew here. Just 3 volunteers to begin setting up the research station." Kim nodded sadly. "The warning stands. Turn. Back. But I know you won't listen. No one ever does. It's what makes us human, our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. We refuse to accept that some doors should remain closed." The cycle was beginning again, just as it always had. Just as it always would.